Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. 25 years of Pokemon. Pokemon has been in my life for the majority of it at this point, which is like it's insane to me. It's hard to fathom at points, but and for me in my life in particular, it's been consistent. Over the years, I've played a lot of the games. I've watched different animes for it, whether we're talking about various portions of the main anime or things like Pokemon Origins and Pokemon Generations and stuff like that. Whatever the case is, I watched it. Oh, and the Mega Evolution specials. Yeah, those were cool. They were sick. But so you have all those, right? I've watched a lot of Pokemon, played a lot of Pokemon, read a lot of things from Pokemon, a lot of things about Pokemon, watched a lot of videos about Pokemon in addition to watching Pokemon. And just it's always been consistent, and I've talked to a lot of people about it over the years. And if you've watched my channel for even a little bit, you probably won't be surprised to hear just how long Pokemon's been in my life because I've talked about it more than once, to say the least. So in this video, I'm gonna take you on my journey, and it's kind of gonna there's parts of it that'll be linear, and some of it will go kind of in different spots because 25 years is a long time, and there's a lot of Pokemon stuff. But yeah, and I'll try to avoid like any major spoilers for anything Pokemon. You're free to assume that spoilers are gonna happen, but I mostly don't need to talk about them, right? Like so just wanted to preface the rest of this video with that. Yeah, so let's get into it more so. So I started, or rather, my experience started with Pokemon when it came to the games. Gen 1, Pokemon Red, 1998. At the time, we didn't know that Pokemon had already been a thing and had been like a thing for 2 years, and there's a whole backstory behind that, and that's really cool. But in '98, it hit the states, and I asked my parents about that, like, why did they get me Pokemon? I'm like, because it was just really great. I'm glad that you all got it to me, but what made you get it? And they were like, you asked for it, and I'm like, what? I did. Apparently. I don't remember that part, but I do remember getting it. Um, and so my journey started with Pokemon Red, and it was really fun. It's just in addition to Pokemon just be a long running franchise and one that I've enjoyed over time, it was also my entry point into RPGs. And I think it's based on this channel alone. If you've been keeping up my stuff, there's a bit of obsession with those over time. You know, not obsession, passion. But yeah, so I am a big fan of Pokemon, and it also got me into RPGs. And I feel like that experience is one that is not exclusive to me. Um, and it spoke to me in many ways. Pokemon is a very mathematical franchise, and it's great to see that math in action as you try to catch them all, and you try to just battle everyone you can and become a Pokemon master, which can mean a lot of things depending on who you talk to. But anyway, you're getting your most out of the games. And what was interesting is, I was there in '98 when Pokemon just exploded, right? Pokemania, it was a thing. It was everywhere. So naturally, that it was everywhere. There was, a game franchise that I had been enjoying. It wasn't long before I was watching anime and playing the Pokemon card a game and watching the movie when it came out, the first one. Mewtwo Strikes Back, all that good stuff. Which when I was younger, they did not have that earlier short about Mewtwo. In his earlier days. I guess they figured that was too serious for kids, but it's brilliant. Anyway, so I started Pokemon with Pokemon Red, had a blast. Got into pretty much anything Pokemon at one point. Even had a Pokédex, and Pokeballs and all that stuff. And what was really cool is we go like in my neighborhood, we explore, find different insects and stuff like that. So there's a bit bug catching that was going on there, and catching them, releasing them, all that good stuff, and very fitting with Pokemon. And yeah, so it's just like started at the time I had no proper context, no one did, for how big that would go on to be, right? Like everyone thought like, oh well, this is big now and it's exploding and it's gonna be a fad. But oh no, no, it wasn't a fad. Like I feel like it's one of those things where if you're not paying attention, it seemed like it slowed down and just stopped being a big thing. But the fact that it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise still, I feel like tells you a lot. Um, so yeah, it was interesting to be a kid at that time. And middle school can be a lot of things. Fun is not a thing that I would think to describe it. But in general, right? Like, but I would say that despite all the unpleasantness, despite a lot of people bullying each other and just being the worst to one another, and that's not a whole kids being kids thing. I maintain, kids wouldn't be that way if they were taught better, just collectively. But that's a whole nother argument for another day. My point is, um, what I noticed is like, everyone was like, they're making fun of this person and that person for their interests. But, when it came to Pokemon, it's like, but y'all all playing that though, right? Y'all all playing Pokemon, right? So it's like, it even got to people who thought they were too cool to do this or do that. They were playing those games though. They were watching that anime. They were trading those cards. They were playing with those cards. Just saying, like Pokemon unites people in some interesting ways. But back to my experience with it overall, I got into Pokemon when I was 11. So it's just like it felt very much like the right time to get into it. And it was just I dig Red. It's a good game, like Red and Blue, and initially Red and Green, and I guess like eventually Yellow. The whole Gen 1. Like they keep on coming back to it for a reason, and I mean that reason is mostly money, but it is good. It's good and it's solid. There's a lot of fun to be found in the story, and a lot to be gotten out of it in that initial, like, 151. And back then, we were all using the internet, but there's a lot of stuff that was just running rampant out there. So, there was a lot of myths about Pokemon and not a lot of fact checking at the time. So a lot of people who thought like you could do a lot of weird, crazy things. Like I know like one of the most popular myths is like there's like the Saint Anne in Vermilion City, and it's like there was a myth about how you can find Mew under a truck. Now the crazy thing is, through some just like off the charts, like bugs and craziness, people have figured out to actually how to get Mew within the game without using a cheating device. I didn't figure that out back then. But one of the cool things in the game, or cool things about the game at the time, is if you weren't running into things on the internet, you were running into things from people, and you found out about like the rare candy code, which is just it's insane. And so everyone had these high level Pokemon, and they were just going at it. Um, but it was like really fun. The music was nice, and it was a powerful start to the series, right? And I mean, I think like the craziest thing though is like we technically got like a more refined version, right? Because you had red and green in Japan, and then like blue version came later, right? So it's like, but we got red and blue, and again like yellow later on, and then a bunch of other remakes down the line. But so for those like first 2 years, it was just like yeah, Pokemon everywhere, Pokemon all the time, and then Gen 2 came out. And at that point, I feel like people were just like, oh, well, Pokemon's probably gonna die down. And for some people, I'm sure it did. But for me, Gen 2 is just amazing. Like, so I got Pokemon Gold, and it was just like, hey, we're gonna jump 3 years ahead. in the Poke World. You're not playing in Kanto anymore. You're playing in Johto. Although I think like at the time, a lot of people didn't quite know those terms. But so you go to Johto, and it's just like a whole new world, new mechanics, new Pokemon, new adventures. A lot of like staples of the series got introduced there, like shiny Pokemon breeding and stuff like that. The night and day cycle, um, held items, a whole lot of other things, right? And instead of like deterministic values, you got like IVs, and more of the EV stuff too. But they split like the special stat into special attack and special defense and stuff like that. For those who care. Um, but my thing was just like it was cool. It upped things, and then once you beat the Elite Four in that game, you get more game. And to this day, I think it's just so cool because I felt like you got like two games for the price of one, and it was just man, dope. It's just I like that game. I like it a lot. And I can't express that enough. And so after that, and like playing those games for a while, like towards the end of middle school, going into high school, I was also exploring a lot of other games, and got into other RPGs as well, like of course, different Final Fantasy games, The Legend of Dragoon, stuff like that. But also exploring different games overall, like Metal Gear Solid, like Tekken 2, and just a lot of PlayStation games in general. Um, so Playing Pokemon took a back seat for a while, but but not really though. So during the PlayStation, or it took sort of a backseat, but I would keep on coming back to Gold, and sometimes playing Red, and Yellow, which I had at the time, and because I got Yellow at some point or another. But yeah, so after after the PlayStation era, moving into PlayStation 2, then things started to slow down with playing Pokemon. But if I wasn't playing Pokemon, I was watching it for a while, and that died down too. But it was always a good talking point, right? And then in college, I did get to play Gen 3, which was cool. And then towards the end of college, Gen 4. And after college, Gen 5. I never actually got to 6, never got to 7, but I got 8, 9, um, over the years. Well, I guess like depending on where some Pokemon games lay, 7 might be included, but not the main games, if that makes sense. But my whole thing is like, so with the games, it's been kind of spread out over the years, and like I also played, different side games. Some that come to mind are just like Pokemon Stadium, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Tournament, stuff like that. And yeah, so the games have been spread out, but like I played a good deal of the various generations. Also, Legends. Yeah, playing Arceus like is just it was an experience like that I largely liked. Um, so there's been a fair amount of the games, and for the anime, it's something that like I watched it religiously when I was a kid. I really dug it, and I watched that for a while, a long while, but then kind of fell off. But over the years, I'd see different clips, and like I said, before I would watch things like Pokemon Origins when that came out, and Pokemon Generations when that came out, and is the Mega Evolution specials were coming out, and got to see those too, and they were really cool. For the movies, the first few I had seen, and then like the other ones here and there, and that was spread out. But yeah, so over these 25 years though, it's just been like Pokemon is like it's a franchise that's never quite left from my sights, because I was always playing something, watching something, reading something, uh, talking about something, Pokemon. And in recent years, I've only gotten into it more, and it was interesting because like I know like after college, I was like playing like that fifth gen, like that Black White and Black White 2. I played like Black and Black 2, during that time, and playing those. I got into watching more videos about Pokemon, like on YouTube and stuff like that. And over time, I would always like read up on things too and find out more about the history. And it's been cool. And again, if you've been on a channel, you know that I've talked about Pokemon quite a bit because one of the things that I deeply enjoy about it is like it's very mathematical. And here's the thing, like I mean, everything is mathematical. It always has been. But with Pokemon, there's a lot that's made explicit that I can dig. And then there's a lot that isn't said, but the math is still going on. And what I also like is that over time, a lot of fans, have uncovered more and more about the different mechanics and about the math involved. And, they're increasing their odds to get shinies. They're figuring out how to, like, bring out the best in their Pokemon. Figuring out how EVs work before Pokemon themselves actually, went into that a bit more. Figuring out how to get the most out of IVs and breeding and stuff like that. Building their best teams, playing the best tricks, just figuring out so many different things. And I think that's cool because, when I've talked to people about that who've, just dove in, they're always passionate about it. They're always figuring out a bunch of different things about it. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really, really cool. And so over the years, like, I mean, I can't even keep up with all Pokemon, but it's just like yeah, I find like in each generation there's some that I can like. And I don't think there's the same issue with some people when they're saying like it's being less creative over time. I don't think that's the case. I think there's something that should get ironed out more about the franchise, but I don't think it's getting less creative. That is just my opinion on it, which is right. But more seriously, like I never really like that criticism because sometimes we hear it about Pokemon type, but I'd argue that some of the earlier Pokemon, not all of them were deeply creative, or at least not what some people would call deeply creative. It's a subjective thing, but the thing is like I think you're not gonna like every Pokemon, but a lot of hard work goes into most Pokemon in any generation. I feel, and it's just like there's so many of them. It's just wild. Also, while we're here, with the cards, a lot of us were playing, the Pokemon card game, but how many of us actually knew what we were doing with that? I'd argue not a lot. And speaking of that, like there was a Pokemon trading card game, video game. If anyone remembers that, that was crazy. And also, while we're here, I'm thinking back. It's like we used to use like the link cable for the Game Boy. Like you used to use that to trade Pokemon. Used to use that to battle. Now we got Wi-Fi. We've had it for a while, but my point is, times change, and it was different. So it's like to get the most out of Pokemon, you had to get that link cable and you had to do that. So also let's see, because like in terms of product, like I said earlier, I had the Pokédex, I had some Pokeballs. I'm pretty sure there was a Pikachu mini game. I feel that like there's like a Pikachu virtual pet. Is that ringing a bell to anyone? I feel like that was a thing that I had. And with the Pokédex, like I did, I think I found that at some point or another. I would have to like look again. I'm not sure if it got thrown away, but one time when I was visiting my parents, like yeah. So Pokemon has just it's been around for I mean at this point going on 30 years. It's been around for 27 and it's been in my life for 25. And I think what's really cool is so I was talking about some of the games and generations I played. One of the other big things like in terms of like other games is like Pokemon Go, which I played like every day. I remember back when it came out. It came out like 20 years after the original Pokemon, and it was like it wasn't the same type of Pokemania, but it was still like really hyped. Everyone was playing that game, and it was cool to see people get that like more openly excited about Pokemon. Because the truth is, right, it's always been there. There's always been people excited, but I haven't seen it be on that level in a while. I remember teaching at that time, and I was talking about Pokemon Go, that came out, and I was like, it's wild. I remember being in middle school when that came out, and I got looks. They were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, I was in middle school, but they were like, "But that would mean." I'm like, "What would it mean?" They're like, "You're not old enough to to have had that happen." I'm like, "I'm older than you think." And we had a conversation, and I'm like, "Well, what was your guesses?" Um, and so it's just that was funny. But yeah, for them, it was like they weren't. Some of them weren't um, old enough to remember that. They would have been like literal babies, which is that's crazy to think about, right? Like some of them might have been like some of them were just like born that same year that it hit the states. So like it's like seriously babies, like it's wild. But Pokemon Go is something that I've enjoyed. I've had it on different phones over the years, and built up my collection. I've gotten a fair amount of shinies over the years, and not as many legendaries, but a fair amount. Um, but yeah, so I enjoyed that. Like I'm checking in with that, and talking to people about that too. So it's just like Pokemon. It's the kind of thing that it just keeps on being there, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But there was a time where people thought it was just a fade. Oh, sorry, just a fad. They thought it was just a fad and that it would fade. But no. I do think like it feels like sometimes they stretch themselves a bit thin, and I hope that gets better. But overall, yeah, Pokemon, it's a wild thing, and it's been around for ages at this point. And there's so many people that are coming into this world that do not know a world without Pokemon. No, like seriously though, right? It's crazy when you think about it, because you could be 25 now and not have lived in a world that Pokemon was not a part of. Think about that. Like, but yeah, so it's just like it's one of my favorite franchises. Pokemon Gold is my favorite of a lot of the great games, and Raichu is my favorite Pokemon. Not Pikachu, Raichu. Just saying. And it's cool to see people to get um, interested in Pokemon over time, or see people come back to it. It's cool that there are tournaments. It's cool that there's like challenges associated with the games. Stuff that people collectively do, things that people do personally. It's cool to see different strategies pop up and more resources online about Pokemon over time. And I personally enjoy talking about Pokemon on the channel, because it's one of those things where some people might not think about it as math, because that's just how math gets treated a lot of times, even though it's literally in everything and that it is everything. And that's something that I want to hope, sorry, that I hope to improve over time. And when you start talking about Pokemon, and you do get people that have been a fan of series, they're like, "Hey, yeah, there is math in that," and they will start talking about their experiences with Pokemon and sharing some cool things, because everyone's got different Pokemon stories, right? Everyone's got something about the game that draws them to it, and everyone can talk about the math in it if they want to. And I personally like to, and it's just great talking to people about it. It's really cool. So that's about all I want to say. And I'll see you on the next video. Professor Prime out.